It's Beyond the Session, the show where your therapist finally gets a turn to talk. My name's Kathleen and I'm your host. I'm a registered social worker. And today I've got Lindsay staying in the studio, and he's a registered psychotherapist from Reset Counseling and Psychotherapy in Barrie. I asked my friend ChatGPT to come up with a tagline for our show today, and it said, "Welcome to the unfiltered therapy room where therapists let loose and speak their minds." So there you have it. You can release your inhibitions, finally, and let loose and say whatever you want.
Everything I ever wanted.
Today we're talking about how to build a mental health toolbox. This is part 1 of the series, and specifically we're looking at good habits for good days. How can you build a good mental health toolbox when you're in a good place, when your mental health is feeling balanced, you're feeling okay, and you have the energy and reserves to be proactive in your mental health. Full disclosure, we are married to each other, so we really get a good look into each other's habits and routines. And so we're going to draw from that a little bit today from our own household, as well as some professional tips that we like to share with clients on how to give yourself a good fighting chance to have the best mental health that you can and have the best days possible. Are you ready?
Ready when you are.
I think an interesting place to start is actually just to ask you, Lindsay, what are some of your morning routines that you build in and things that you do every day that are just kind of habits that you've developed over time?
This one is actually from a book I read. I don't even remember the author anymore, but he wrote that when you wake up, you want to think about 3 things really quickly. Your light, water, and movement. So I took that in because my routine is loosely based on cognitive behavioral therapy, of course, because I'm a therapist. So I think about how to change the state of my body first, and then change the state of my mind, and then decide what to do for the day. And that's why typically I wake up, and the very first thing I do is get as much water in me as possible, and then I go outside if I can, and I do exercise. For me, and I'm not saying that morning exercise is the best for everyone, because there are different studies on that shows otherwise. But for me, it is the best because it is the most consistent I can find myself doing it. Otherwise, the day kind of gets a hold of me and I don't get a chance to. So that's my current. It's been for a while. I would say I'm decently, and you could attest to that, I'm decently consistent with that.
Yeah, you are. And I think we found over time that my style is a little different. I don't get up and go straight to exercise, right? Although I do need movement. But for me, I want to get organized for my day. So I'm puttering in the morning, right? That's my way of moving. So I'm, getting water, getting the kids' lunches, trying to get the laundry moving, that type of thing. So I kind of go straight into chore mode because I find that for myself, I'm more task oriented. And so if I can kind of get all those balls rolling first thing in the morning, then I feel like I'm on top of my day and I have an idea of where the day is going. And later on in the day, I'll jump into exercise, right? I like doing that, mid-morning, or sometimes after dinner, I like to do that. So yeah, I think the idea here is we're just kind of sharing some things that work for us. And as a listener, you can take or leave those, right? And I think that's kind of the key here when we're talking about good habits and good routines, is that all we can do is offer suggestions, and you can think about your own life and how it's going to fit in, right? I really like when I was talking with Sarah about mindfulness a few episodes back. We were talking about how to build mindfulness into your day. And her strategy with clients, she said, I always try to just ask questions, right? Ask my client, hey, how do you see that working into your day? What are some things that you think you could do? How could you spend a few minutes building this into your routine? And asking the client those questions so that they're kind of brainstorming and looking into their own life and their own ideals and their own habits to kind of pull out the things that are important to them. It's not just applying a prescriptive method here. And I think you're nodding your head, Lindsay. That's something that we always try to do with clients, right? We don't want to just prescribe, here's something, water, light, exercise, you do this and it's going to fix everything for you. But the idea is we're just sharing habits that you could adapt into your life. And we have found for us personally that it's been beneficial.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pushback on the prescriptive style of of telling you, what your morning routines should be. For example, you see, you read a lot of books about that in self-help, and people are sick of it. They're sick of hearing how much they need to get cold plunges and journaling and yoga and the little things. It seems like a trend takes on and everyone's pushing the same ideas for a little bit, and
Yeah.
then inevitably people push back and say like, yeah, that doesn't work for me. So no, it's not prescriptive. I think what is helpful though is to talk about ideas. I mean, sometimes I do share some of my own things, not so that my clients would follow through the same way, but it's
Hmm.
just to jog ideas with them, because sometimes you just don't know. I mean, when I ask the question, like, what should your routine be, and they'll be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's when it's like, okay, well, here's some things that I do. Here's some things I hear other people do. Like, do you need to do some research on this, right? And then based on that, we can try and pilot a few things. And even with routines, I think that, in the ideal world, you do them all the time. But there are seasons. There are seasons when you are able to and seasons when you can't. We just came back from vacation, and all routines at that point are thrown out the window,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
you kind of have to reset a little bit. And that actually is a good time to rethink your routine too, whether you like it or not. In fact, that's exactly what happened with us. We went on the
Hmm.
trip, came back, and decided that we're joining the 5 a.m. club for a little while. And we'll see how that goes.
We just got back from our vacation,
Oh,
and because of our jet lag, we saw it as an opportunity to really use our mornings. So far, it's been going pretty well. We've been waking up at 5.
yeah.
It gives us, we're kind of trying to break it into 30-minute chunks, 30 minutes to work on house stuff, 30 minutes to do some kind of exercise, 30 minutes to do some reading if we want. We can kind of do whatever we want. And the main idea is that our kids are not up yet. So it's actually some quiet time before they get up. And it gives us a little bit of headspace so that we can get a grip on our day before it kind of gets overwhelming.
Right. And then we're going to go to your sister's this weekend, and then we'll see what happens, right? It might, again, flip it on its head for at least for the weekend, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that there's seasons that some habits stick on, and they do fall away to the wayside sometimes, and that's okay. And that's when you just have to refigure out what's the new thing again. So it is an ongoing process.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're always changing, right? And part of it is that our family's growing too. So then as our kids get older, the time that we're waking up might change, or the level of chaos in the day might get lower so that we can get a little bit more productivity during the day. And, it was very different when our kids weren't sleeping through the night too, when they were consistently not sleeping through the night, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
right? When we were in newborn stage, it's like you just get all the sleep you can, you nap when you can. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more of like a survival mode. So you're right. We adapt for different seasons of our life and um, do the best we can, right? I like the idea of a mental health toolkit. It's a bit of an abstract concept, but what do you think that would look like for someone? What would their mental health toolkit be? What would be a definition of that, I
Mm.
guess?
Yeah, I think, well, because mental health is integrated with your actual health. That's why your actual health matters too. And I think that would be kind of step one of your mental health, is that you do take care of your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's basics, right? Like everyone knows the pillars of health is your sleep, your food, and your exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want to have better mental health, you need to be working on those three items. Uh, as a primary. Because how can you have good, positive mental health if you are falling apart in your physical health? Of course, then there's the mental health toolbox, and there's lots there. My favorite right now, and for the last year or so, is applying principles of positive psychology. I think that's very proactive. It's not something that you only use, in negative times, but you're consistently coming back to general positive mindset tools, and there are defined tools for that. I think that makes it very helpful, because then it's not just abstract,
Mm-hmm.
that you can apply to your day.
And I mean, that's what this podcast is for. This is called Good Habits for Good Days. So we're not talking about when you're having a really tough day, things to try and, beat over your own head or feel bad about that you're not accomplishing, right? I think the idea is that when you are in a place that you feel um, generally healthy, I would say, or in a space where you feel ready to add things to your life, then that's a really good time to build in just small things at a time, right? Baby steps. In time, those things accumulate, right?
One of the motivators for me of being consistent with positive routines or rhythms is the idea of compound interest. Because when you apply compound interest to finances, it's very easy to see that. You put a little bit of money, $100, $200, the earlier you start, the more effect that has on you. So it doesn't feel like you're doing a whole lot when you're putting $100 or $200 away per month into your investments. But after a couple of years, after a certain inflection point, suddenly it starts rolling and it becomes a lot more powerful. And the compound interest principle can really apply to almost any areas of your life, whether it's relational or it's your mental health, right? So if I am practicing pessimism for years and years and years, like it doesn't feel like it's changing my mental health too much initially, but eventually it'll become who I am. The good news is our brains are malleable. And so you are able to switch that through the practice of optimism.
Mm-hmm.
And if you practice that on a daily, then again, it doesn't feel like much initially, but eventually it would add up and you would find yourself becoming a more optimistic person.
Yeah. And I mean, you've talked about how our mental health plays into our physical health and vice versa, right? Our physical health affects our mental health. And you can tell when someone has spent years and years in pessimism, they wear it in their body. It's, apparent in the way that they look in their countenance, right? So, I mean, that's a bit of bonus material today. But I like the idea of small changes can make such a difference in your life. Anything you're doing really that's beneficial to your mental health, beneficial to your physical health, improving your nutrition, improving diet, exercise, sleep, all the things that we know are good for us. When you're integrating those into your life, no matter what it is, it's going to be a beneficial change for you. And it's going to help you, feel more in control in some ways over your own mental health and physical health, and put you in a good position so that when life happens, when you have tough days, which are going to happen, that you have some routine to fall back on, right? To kind of reset yourself and just kind of get back to basics. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think the biggest predictor of happiness in the long term is quality relationships. So, I mean, I'm speaking as someone who's married, but this can apply even if you're not, though. That you prioritize quality relationships is the positive interactions you have with people. That if you are intentionally trying to improve those or have positive interactions, that in itself becomes a buffer for the stresses in your life, right? Yeah. This is something that I'm a little bit more passionate about because I researched it. People who are having good leadership in a company, for example, which means that there's these positive interactions happening between them, it actually becomes a buffer for them, so that even if they're in a high stress work environment, they're less likely to have the negative effects from it, like burnout.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's just one major aspect. I think it's not the only, but if you look at research around marriage, for example, with the Gottman study, couples who are happy in the long term are having 20-to-1 ratio positive to negative interactions. So there's all these little things that, like, say something nice about your spouse every day, do a quick check-in, and then do a debrief. Small little things, affection, just a smile, 5 minutes worth, right? I saw the interview with John Gottman recently where he says, men should be kissing their wives for 6 seconds every day. The reason why 6 seconds is it takes that long to release oxytocin into the bloodstream. And that's why people who kiss their wives 6 seconds or longer per day on average live 4 years longer than people who don't. And that's wild, right? Because it's the happiness, the connection hormone that's released, and it's really helpful for your mental health and your health. And so that's why I'm bringing that up, that in itself is also a habit. It's not just personal individual habits, but you have to look out for positive interactions in friendships and in relationships around you.
I like the idea of a buffer, right? I think it makes sense that even if we go through a crummy day at work, we come home, we can talk to our spouse or our friends or our children if they're old enough to understand, and we have an outlet. We have someone to bounce ideas off of. And even that in itself is soothing to our mental health, right?
Yeah.
It makes us feel like we're not alone. It gives us opportunity to vent or whatever we need in that
Yeah.
moment.
Or we're connected. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
the big one.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
connectedness.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Belonging, connectedness.
Yeah.
And you see that, in all sorts of studies, right? We've been peeking a little bit at the Blue Zones documentary on Netflix, and these people who are centenarians, they're living so long, but one of the major factors, besides the exercise and diet, is the connectedness,
Yeah.
belonging to a group, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So for our toolkit, good relationships, surround yourself with good people,
huge, big
right?
one. Yeah,
And, one of the habits that might be there is taking the time for the people that you love. Take the
yeah,
time to sit and talk with them, whether it's your kids, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your friends, pick up the phone and call them and prioritize that in your life.
yeah. During the lockdown, there was seasons where I felt really blah, right?
Mm,
And you would have picked up on it and said, you should call your friend. And
yeah.
so I did, and I would be chipper for a week. Right?
Right. Yep.
Right? So it's like, oh yeah, like I didn't realize how big of an impact that was having on my life,
Mm-hmm.
to just have a good conversation. I know a lot of people struggle with this among my clients. Like, I don't have friends. That's why we have to be intentional about building relationships. It's hard. We're in a modern world right now where we're inundated with technology. Everything's connected through social media, but it's shallow and it's not real. And that's why there's so much depression and anxiety. And I think that if we were able to just go old school a little bit, pick a
Mm-hmm.
few friends, pick up the phone and just call them,
Yeah.
that in itself could really change and be a buffer for our mental health.
I mean, you're an extrovert, so like having those friendships and those social interactions, that's something that you need to be getting regularly, right?
Yeah.
Or you do feel down. Whereas myself, like I'm pretty happy on my own for a long time, but I find for myself that, being involved in community in scenarios where I have nice acquaintances who I'll chit chat with, we'll have small talk, but then I don't feel any social obligation to them beyond, being in a fitness class together or something. That type of scenario really works for me. I find that's really good for my mental health because it's like friendship without
Yep.
the pressure of, I
Absolutely.
need to follow up with them. I need to invite them for a barbecue. Like it's just not
Yeah.
there. So I
Yeah.
find that's more helpful.
Yeah. Okay. So this brings me back to a book I've read a few years ago, and you've heard me talk about it quite a bit because it was impactful to me, I think. It was a book called Happy City.
Mm,
And it was about the design of cities and how that makes people happy. So they talk about green spaces, for example. There's like studies that show, like, same neighborhood, one side has a park, the other side doesn't, and just all sorts of measures of happiness on one side is better than the other,
yeah.
right? Just having a little bit of green space. But then one of the things they found was called, they termed it, and I've been using that word since, as conviviality.
Mm,
And conviviality is the network of acquaintances. It's like
right.
the people that you run into on the street, in your neighbor, or the people that you see at your Zumba classes
Mm-hmm.
that are acquaintances. You know them by first name, you smile, there's positive interaction there, and there's still privacy. They're not necessarily in your life,
Right.
but you trust them enough to smile when you see them. That's a huge buffer, again, for people's stress, a positive for their mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually something that I really like about where we live. Lots of people have dogs, and
Yeah.
you kind of see the same people around the same time going out and walking their dogs, right? You know that if you're going to go out for a walk, you can smile, say hi, the dog sniffs your hand, and that's the extent of the interaction. But it's actually just like you said,
Yeah.
conviviality,
Yeah.
positive. It's like we're living peaceably together.
Right. I mean, we're a bit of a spectacle because we have 4 young kids, right? So people would always see us and they had to drop the, oh, you must have your hands full.
Oh my gosh. Everyone says that.
Yeah, which is fine. It's actually it's one of those things that it might bother us a bit, and then eventually it becomes endearing because it's like, yeah, people are just trying to have small talk and be kind.
Exactly.
And And it is good, people are appreciating or respecting that we have 4 kids, or they're seeing and they're smiling, they're saying they're so precious, they're so cute, and we're like, yeah, I know, and I need reminders of that. So
Exactly.
people always talk about the good old days,
Yeah.
right? We just walk to places, we talk to
Hmm.
people, and I say let's bring it back.
Yeah. And some of that is lifestyle choices. Here's one that we've built in that obviously doesn't work for everyone, but we've had the blessing, I guess, of being able to build our life within a 5-minute drive radius.
Hmm.
So 5-minute drive from our house, we can do groceries, we can bring the kids to school, our banking, our office, like all the things that we need to get to are pretty close.
Yeah.
And so then it means that it does free up that time for us to have just chill time in the backyard in the afternoon after the kids get home from school. And rather than being stuck in traffic commuting and feeling stressed about that, right?
Yeah.
And that was a really active lifestyle choice that when we were first building our life together, that we said, hey, this is a boundary that we want. We don't want to be commuting. We want to do our best to build our life close by. And thankfully, it worked out. It doesn't for everyone.
Yeah. And it's still a deciding factor for us even now, right? We're thinking about, okay, we kind of need a bigger house, but is it worth it for us to move further away? Where driving is longer, commute is longer. And a lot of times our answer has been coming back to probably not. Like, we designed a pretty sweet life right now, in the sense that we're so close to everything.
Yeah, exactly. And these aren't necessarily daily habits. This is more like bigger life choices that we're looking at this point.
Yeah.
But those also trickle into our mental health. The choice of living close to work. When we do come back to that question of, are we going to move to, somewhere out of town with a bigger space for us? We talk about it. We might spend a couple days looking at the pros and cons and where we might choose to go. And then when we come back to it, we're like, hey, the fact that we can drive anywhere in such a short time, that's like giving back so much of our life to us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've lived out of town before, you've commuted before, and we just know how much that takes from us.
One of my favorite financial books when I was younger was by Andrew Holland, The Millionaire Teacher. It's where I learned a lot about this compound interest idea. He wrote a new book. I never read it, actually. I just saw a synopsis, but it was helpful by itself. He talked about the 4 legs of success. And he says if you don't have one of them, the whole table falls. So you need to have all 4. So physical health, physical and mental health, he put it all in one leg. Relational health, he put in another leg. Financial health, the good enough money health, that's what he's talking about. And then the 4th one was purpose, a sense of purpose. And I thought, you know what, that's pretty fair. When I look at the dimensions of life, it covers quite a bit of what it takes to feel healthy. Yeah. I think. So we've touched on a few of these already right now. We've touched on the physical mental health aspect. We touched on the relational health. Well, we didn't touch on financial, but maybe we shouldn't. And it's a huge part of it. It really is, because people, their study happiness with finances that show that up to a certain amount, it does affect you directly.
Absolutely.
Correlation wise. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't have enough, which a lot of people feel that way,
yeah,
it will affect your mental health.
I think the idea is if you don't have money, you're stressed, you can't buy things, right? Or if you're stuck in a job that you hate and you can't leave it because you won't make it through the next couple months while you look for a new job.
Right, 100%. And it is important, because I think a lot of people have this really romantic idea of like, I just got to do what I love. And so they say money doesn't matter. I hear this a lot with clients, younger ones. And I would say to some degree, I see what you mean. Your mental health, your friendships, your passions. You don't want to completely kibosh those in pursuit of money. But I do ask them, give me a number. Like, what's good enough for you? Yeah. For you so that you can have an idea of what kind of career to pursue and craft aspects of your life around that. Because the financial bit is going to cause you stress unless you have enough. So yeah, when we moved to Barrie, my mindset was very simple. It was like, okay, what's the median household income here? And my intention was to make that amount by myself, so that we could have a lifestyle where we have kids, and if you wanted to, you could have stayed home, and I would have been able to make enough for that. So I had to think about, what jobs offer that, or if jobs don't offer it, then what business would offer it. So that was my mindset. I mean, coming back to the 4th leg, is the purpose one. When you look at the Blue Zones documentary again, one of the common themes in all of these different Blue Zone communities is that they have some form of faith community. They have something there to believe in. And this makes good psychological sense to me. I think that, I just had someone recently tell me that they are really getting into a very nihilistic point of view, and that has demotivated them of feelings, really, of hope for anything in
Yeah.
life. And that's the actual psychological definition of hope, is to have a vision of what you are aiming for, and then also a vision of the pathways towards it. And if you're missing either of one of those, then you're going to be living a hopeless existence, which will be negatively correlated
Right.
with all sorts of positive things like optimism or happiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the fourth leg to consider from terms of your toolkit of what it means to proactively build on your mental health is what brings me meaning, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a resurgence right now, I think. I've been hearing this more and more with clients, of people who are not as antagonistic towards faith at this point.
Mm-hmm.
People are starting to be wondering about it.
Yeah.
I think it's because, and I'm not, there are some atheist agnostics that I really respect. So this is not a put down at all for people who are not in this camp. But I think that a lot of people are just recognizing how empty it really can be when maybe this is it.
Right.
Right. A lot of people are grappling with mortality, especially after COVID, right?
Yeah.
Or the death of close ones. And then the question immediately comes back to, so what about mine? And what does it mean? What does my life mean?
Yeah.
And it's so overwhelming, and maybe I should just give up. But whereas people who can find purpose and meaning, they are going to thrive better. And that's the whole thesis of a classic book called The Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. So that's a really important book that I think many people should read.
For sure. Right. And that could be a faith conversation for someone. Or you mentioned the blue zones, and for some of the people in those communities, it's having a sense of, we're working together for something, I'm serving my community, that type of thing, right? So yeah, there's layers of meaning, I guess, in what you're saying.
Yeah, that's true. I'm currently reading the biography of Elon Musk, very controversial figure at this time. One thing that you can say of him is he has really strong sense of purpose and meaning, which is why he's able to rally lots of people onto his cause. It's super clear. We're going to put colonies on Mars. Every business that he's doing, maybe except for X, Twitter, is for that purpose, right?
Yeah. Can you tell me those table legs again?
So the table legs, one is your mental and physical health. The second one is your quality relationships. The third one is enough money. And then the fourth one is a purpose.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a good one to put inside the toolkit. So I guess one of the nagging questions when we're talking about all of this is that, we don't all just have endless time in our day to focus on our mental health. So how can we balance our mental health needs when we have a life, when we have responsibilities? We got to get to the job. We got all the kids screaming at us. Do you have any sage advice for us?
No, because I mean, again, this is so personal, and it's so hard to just prescribe again, because, I've been very blessed to have a business and to be the boss of my own business and to have a lot more control over my time because of that. And so I try to be mindful that not everyone has that. So it's easy for me to say, well, you just got to carve it out, right? I would probably say that a good way to do this is take into account some of the things we said today and kind of rate them, find out where you're lacking, because that's potentially an area for what's keeping you feeling kind of down, or like something's missing. Well, what is it? Is it quality relationship? Is it mental health?
Right.
Physical health? Is it financial? Which one is it? Okay. And think about how, for a season of time, to focus on that particular one, set some goals for it and see how that goes. Pilot it, right? Because, when I first started working out, I didn't think it would become forever. It was like, I have this cool program I want to try out. It ended up being really sustainable for me.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I loved the idea of keeping up with it and being a healthy old man. so that's why I kept doing it. And now it's just so part of my habits that it's hard to not do it even.
Right.
Right.
And when you don't, you kind of feel crummy.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're creating new realities or new routines for yourself. And so set some goals. Don't go too hard, probably, right? Like I like to go with the good enough principle. Some people, they just do like really, really hard short spurts of something and then burn out and not ever do it again.
Right.
So it could be helpful to kickstart things if you're not doing it at all. right? But then afterwards, you need to start thinking about, okay, if I like this, I want to keep it sustainable, then what is a version of that I can do? For example, I used to do much longer workouts, and that was cutting into our family time and me being around to help out, getting kids ready in the morning or whatever. So then I fine tuned it. And now I do like very short workouts, but they're still effective and sustainable.
Something I do when I'm finding our schedules getting crazy, or I feel just a general sense of overwhelm with the amount of things that need to happen in a day. Sometimes I'll just take a few minutes or even just kind of have it in the back of my head as I'm going through the week and take inventory of my time and realize, hey, the morning's really busy getting the kids to school. The afternoon's really busy when they get home, like from home time until they're in bed, basically. So those are two crazy chunks of time where there's not a lot of flexibility. But then in between there, I might have 20 minutes that I'm just scrolling on my phone, and I don't have any problem with that. It's not a values thing, right? There's nothing wrong with scrolling on your phone. But for myself personally, I have other things that I would prefer to be doing with that time that I find are more proactive for my mental health. So sometimes it's just kind of taking stock of our habits, and here's what my day normally looks like. Here's areas of time where I have wiggle room, and then working within that, not trying to, reinvent your entire schedule. Hey, well, we are out of time, but we look forward to part 2 of the series, which is the mental health toolbox. In part 2, we're going to be looking at how to have good coping mechanisms when we're having really bad days. So in this episode, we were talking about positive psychology and how to, work from a good place and build in good habits. And on the next episode, we're going to talk about how to cope well when things aren't going our way, when we're having those rough days. Lindsay, thanks for joining me in the studio today. This is Beyond the Session, brought to you by Reset Counseling and Psychotherapy in Barrie. If you have any questions about what you've heard, if you have any ideas for podcast episodes, we'd love to hear from you at resetbarrie@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.